Hey, fourth graders. Today our learning target is I can add decimal fractions in tenths and hundredths with unlike denominators. When we say unlike, we mean denominators that are not the same. Okay, what I'd like you to do first of all is think of decimals like money. For example, this is a place value chart. A $100 bill is in the hundreds place value. A $10 bill is in the tens place value. A $1 bill is in the ones place value because it's worth 1. And then we have the decimal point, and everything to the right of this is a fraction or a part of a whole or less than 1 whole. Think of a dime as tenths because 10 dimes make a dollar or 1 whole. Think of a penny as the hundredths spot in the place value chart because 100 pennies makes $1. Okay? Also, I'd like you to think of the word equivalent. Equivalent means equal. Okay? Also known by the equal sign. So we all know that 10 pennies is equivalent or equal to 1 dime. 10 pennies, 10 hundredths, is equal to 1 dime, 1/10. Okay? They are equivalent. It is the same amount, it's just a different name. The same thing holds true for visual decimals. Equivalent decimals are decimals that name the same value. 3/10 is the same as or equivalent to 30 hundredths. Here's how we write 3/10, 0.3 tenths, because we say the decimal, the number after the decimal, and then the spot it ends in, 3/10. And we say the full number here, 30, and the spot it ends in, hundredths. And you can visually see that 3 dimes is equal to 30 pennies, or 3/10 is the same as 30 hundredths. Okay, so what you're going to be doing today is you are going to be adding decimals with unlike denominators. Adding decimals with denominators that are not the same. So what you need to do is make these decimals the same. Here you have 3/10 and here you have 30 hundredths. So in order to make this denominator the same, we have to create a bottom number of 100. So what we're saying is we are going to take this 3/10 and we are going to create a new equivalent fraction or decimal fraction with a bottom number of 100. This 3/10 right here. So we ask ourselves, well, how did 10 become 100? And we know that we had to multiply by 10, okay? And what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. What you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator to get an equivalent fraction. You can multiply or divide. And 3 times 10 is 30. So we have just renamed this fraction 3/10 with a bottom number or a denominator of 100 to be 30 hundredths. Now that we have found an equivalent fraction to 3/10 with a denominator of 100, we can add it to this number. If the denominators are the same, we are able to add the numbers. And how do we do that? We add the numerator, 30 plus 30, 30 plus 30, and that equals 60. We add the numerators, and the denominator stays the same. The denominator always stays the same. And that, my friends, is how you add equivalent fractions with different denominators. Let's take a look at another one. Here we have 1/10 plus 30 hundredths. 1/10 plus 30 hundredths. We need to have the same denominator. So we're going to go ahead and take this 1/10 and we are going to create an equivalent fraction, this 1 dime, and we're going to create an equivalent fraction with an 100 at the bottom. Okay, well, how many pennies would that be? You can think of it that way. But ask yourself, how did the 10 become 100? Did I multiply or divide? And we multiplied, and what did we multiply by? 10, because 10 times 10 equals 100. Whatever you do to the denominator, you need to do to the numerator in order to keep the fraction equivalent. And 1 times 100, oops, that's 10. 1 times 10 is 10. Okay, so now we have 1/10 is equivalent to 10 hundredths. We have just renamed 1/10 to 10 hundredths, or 1 dime to 10 pennies. Now we can do the adding. We can add it to 30 hundredths. So we'll go ahead and write 30 hundredths right here, 30 pennies. Okay, and you add the numerator. 10 plus 30 is 40, and the denominator stays the same. Yes, it stays the same because the denominator is the size of the piece, and the size of the piece is this little hundredth, these little squares, and that does not change. The size of the squares do not change. The number changes. When you add this is 10 hundredths, to this 30 hundredths, it becomes 40 hundredths. The number of pieces change. So you keep the denominator the same and the numerator is what you add. Let's try one more. Okay, you can try to do this one before, if you would like, before I do it on pencil and paper. So we have 2/10. What do we need to change that into? An equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. Okay, we need to find an equivalent fraction for 2/10, so with a denominator of 100. So 2/10 is like 2 dimes. How many pennies are in 2 dimes? But you can ask yourself, how did the 10 become 100? Did I multiply or divide? And of course, you know that we multiply by 10. 10 times 10 is 100. What I do to the numerator, I do to the denominator. Yes, I do the same thing to the denominator to keep it equivalent on the top and bottom. So 2 times 10 is 20. So I have now converted or changed 2/10 to 20 hundredths, 2 dimes to 20 pennies. And now I am able to add it to 70 hundredths or 70 pennies. So we're going to go ahead and write that number down here, and now we can go ahead and do what to the numerators? Yes, we can add the numerators because that is the number of pieces. There are 20 100ths here and 70 100ths here, and together that's 90 of them. But what are they called? They're called hundredths. We must keep the denominator the same because that is the size of the piece, and the size of the piece does not change. So we have now 90 hundredths. The size of the piece is this little square right here, a 100th piece, or a penny. So the answer to this problem is 90 hundredths. Okay, you have learned how to add fractions in tenths and hundredths with unlike denominators. So good luck on your assignment.